Congress could have acted. Congress did not act. Congress did not do this despite passing legislation last summer.
Your own zero tolerance policy, because you lose stuff you're supposed to keep and then you keep stuff that it's illegal to keep.
ATF is not responsible for addressing them. Of course, Congress, you look at the whole field of play as
The ATF's rule is nothing short than that of an assault on our Second Amendment rights.
The Constitution of the United States has a provision that's written into it that allows you to change the Constitution if you feel that it's been in error.
Arising under the Congressional Review Act to disapprove the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives rule.
But today's bill will do nothing but disarm law-abiding citizens. Congress has tried this before.
Supreme Court review. All right, let's dive into what's brewing with the ATF and the Supreme Court. The ATF, that's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, is gearing up to take the Vanderstock frames and receivers case to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, it's all about the constitutionality of those frames and receivers. These are like the building blocks for firearms, and the ATF has some rules about how they're regulated. But hey, not everyone's on board with these rules, and that's where the legal drama kicks in. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals weighed in on the matter, and while they didn't give the ATF a total knockout, they definitely landed some punches. They said, hey ATF, your rule about these frames and receivers, it's got some issues. But here's the twist. They didn't throw the whole rule out the window, they just said it needed some tweaking.
Because lawmaking power rests with the elected representatives of the American people.
records that had not actually been searched, but my understanding
Hundreds of
is
thousands of them.
researchable.
And so that's what you guys do.
As you said, they go hand in hand. Drugs are coming across, guns are coming across. We have a gang problem in this country.
The ATF's rule is nothing short than that of an assault on our Second Amendment rights.
Now, fast forward to the Supreme Court's emergency order. It was like a plot twist in a legal thriller. It's a 5-4 decision, with the majority leaning towards the ATF side. What does this mean? Well, it's like hitting the pause button on the lower court's decision. The Supreme Court basically said, hold up, folks, before anything else happens, we're going to take a closer look at this. And that's where we stand now. The ATF sees this emergency order as a green light to gun it straight to the Supreme Court.
Arising under the Congressional Review Act to disapprove the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives rule.
Again, as ATF director, what Congress passes is what we deal with, and we don't do civil litigation.
And the fact is that a firearm in the hands of a law-abiding citizen is not a threat.
And importantly, from the very tyranny being applied to them to deny that right.
The Constitution of the United States has a provision that's written into it that allows you to change the Constitution if you feel that it's been in error.
They're itching for a full-on debate about the constitutionality of their rules. It's like they're saying, all right, Supreme Court, let's settle this once and for all. But hey, this isn't just about the ATF and their rules. It's about fundamental rights, legal precedents, and the whole shebang. So you better believe there's going to be some serious legal wrangling ahead. Stay tuned, folks. This legal showdown is far from over. Fifth Circuit ruling. Let's break down what went down with the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals and their take on the ATF's frames and receivers rule. The Fifth Circuit Court steps into the ring, ready to weigh in on the legality of the ATF's rule. And what do they say? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. First off, they're on the same page as the lower court judge. They agree that the ATF's rule is a bit shaky. It's like they're saying, yeah, ATF, you might want to rethink this one. But here's where things get interesting. While they're giving the ATF's rule a bit of a slap on the wrist, they're not tossing it out entirely. Instead, they're saying, okay, ATF, we see where you're coming from, but you went a bit too far with this one.
Are you calling for the repeal of the Second Amendment?
But today's bill will do nothing but disarm law-abiding citizens. Congress has tried this before.
To turn millions, tens of millions of law-abiding Americans into criminals overnight.
Sense of subordinate governments to which the people are attached and by which the militia officers are appointed forms a barrier.
We have programs that show that it's not the simple act of owning a firearm.
Gleaned the ruling, but it's not a Civil Rights Division case.
Well, which is it?
In other words, they're giving the ATF a partial win. It's like saying, hey, you're not totally off the hook, but we're not going to throw the whole rulebook at you either. Why'd they do this? Well, it seems like they felt the lower court judge was a bit too heavy-handed with their ruling. It's like they're saying, hold up, let's pump the brakes a bit here. What does this all mean? It means the ATF's rule isn't getting a free pass, but it's not getting the boot either. It's like they're putting it on probation, a warning shot if you will. But don't think this is the end of the story. This legal saga is far from over. With the Supreme Court looming on the horizon, who knows what twists and turns await? Options for the ATF. Alright, let's talk about the options on the table for the ATF. They've got a few paths they can take, and each one comes with its own set of pros and cons. First up, they could go back to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. This is like going back to the scene of the crime, hoping for a different outcome. They could ask the Fifth Circuit to take another look at the case and maybe come to a different conclusion. It's like saying, hey, let's give this another shot. But let's be real, the Fifth Circuit already gave them a bit of a rough ride, so there's no guarantee things will go their way this time either. It's a bit of a gamble if you ask me. Now, they could also kick the can back down to the lower court. This is like hitting the reset button and starting from scratch. They could ask the lower court to reconsider their ruling and maybe give them a bit of a break. It's like saying, alright, let's try this again. But here's the catch. Even if they win some concessions from the lower court, it might not be enough to satisfy everyone. Plus, it could drag things out even longer, and who wants that?
Well, but something did change. What changed is that item that was submitted was not produced and was not the item that was marketed.
In 2012, the Obama-era ATF recognized that these devices serve a legitimate function.
ATF doesn't do civil litigation liability
I know
in that
that.
sense. It's not.
Yes, sir.
Today, violent crime is ravaging many of our communities, and the public is, of course, taking notice as they must.
And you're actively, willfully, and knowingly subverting the Constitution of the United States of America.
ATF is not responsible for addressing them. Of course, Congress, you look at the whole field of play as.
And then there's the big guns, the Supreme Court. This is like bringing in the heavy hitters, hoping for a knockout blow. They could appeal to the highest court in the land and ask for a full-blown review of the case. It's like saying, alright, let's settle this once and for all. But let's not kid ourselves. Getting the Supreme Court involved is no small feat. It's like climbing Mount Everest. It's going to be tough, and there are no guarantees of success. So there you have it, the ATF's options laid out on the table. Which path will they choose? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure. Whatever they decide, it's going to be one heck of a ride. Judge O'Connor's order. Now let's talk about Judge O'Connor's order and what it means for the ATF's next move. Judge O'Connor, the man with the gavel, is keeping a close eye on this legal tug-of-war between the ATF and the courts. He's not sitting back and letting things unfold on their own. He's taking charge. And what's his latest move? Well, he's ordered the ATF to spill the beans. That's right. He wants to know what the ATF's game plan is when it comes to Supreme Court review. He's not beating around the bush either. He's given them a deadline, and it's coming up fast. It's like he's saying, alright ATF, time to show your cards. Why is he doing this? Well, it's all because of that emergency stay from the Supreme Court. It's thrown a wrench into the works, and Judge O'Connor wants some clarity. It's like he's saying, okay, we've got this stay in place, but what's next? We can't just sit around twiddling our thumbs.
By anybody's estimation, is completely unconstitutional.
They want to take away law-abiding citizens' ability to purchase the firearm of their choice.
Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act is a law that provides important immunity to manufacturers.
Any particular incident or time
How many
period.
instances should we be looking at where you've lost guns?
So he's putting the pressure on the ATF to make a move. He wants to know if they're going to appeal to the Supreme Court or if they've got something else up their sleeve. It's like he's saying, hey, let's keep this show on the road. And you can bet the ATF is feeling the heat. They've got to make a decision, and they've got to make it fast. It's like a game of legal chess, and every move counts. So stay tuned, folks. Judge O'Connor isn't backing down, and neither is the ATF. This legal showdown is just heating up, and things are about to get real interesting. Impact of emergency order. let's talk about the shocker drop by the Supreme Court and how it's shaking things up in the legal world. The Supreme Court swoops in with an emergency order, throwing a curveball into the already tangled mess of the ATF case. This emergency order? It's like a thunderclap in the courtroom. Suddenly, everything's up in the air, and the ATF is scrambling to figure out their next move. See, this order puts the ATF between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, they could wait it out and see how things play out in the lower courts, but with the Supreme Court shadow looming overhead, that's a risky move. On the other hand, they could jump straight into the lion's den and seek Supreme Court review immediately. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. Painful, but it might be the quickest way to get things over with.
There's been some discussion about it this morning, but I think most of the American people are not yet aware because the mainstream media is not covering this issue.
Congress could have acted. Congress did not act. Congress did not do this despite passing legislation last summer.
But gun control is not a core issue that we handle.
Second Amendment, your own zero tolerance policy because you lose stuff you're supposed to keep and then you keep stuff that it's illegal to keep.
Within the ATF, not about whether to issue a regulation. The debate about the policy should happen in this body.
And that's where Judge O'Connor's order comes into play. He's not about to let the ATF off the hook that easily. Nope, he wants answers, and he wants them now. It's like he's saying, all right, ATF, time to lay your cards on the table. See, with the Supreme Court's emergency order hanging over their heads, there's no time for dilly-dallying. Judge O'Connor knows that clarity is key, and he's not about to let this case drag on any longer than it has to.
I certainly said that I was in that political campaign, which is far different from where I am now, although the administration's position is that there should be.
Your suggestion that somehow, if we've not served in a combat zone, that we don't care about protecting the lives of our constituents.
Holding the economy hostage to jam through unpopular ideas that can't pass through regular order.
But then you do keep a hold of a bunch of stuff you're not supposed to have a hold of.
So the impact of the Supreme Court's emergency order? It's thrown a wrench into the ATF's plans and forced them to rethink their strategy. And Judge O'Connor's order? It's a reminder that in the legal world, time is of the essence. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.